Mr. Brandon Drury, Adam Mack, Erik the Producer, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thrilled to dig into this because this is a question we get often from friends or clients of ours in the construction space who have talented individuals, who have passion, enthusiasm, and I think similar to you guys, often have a program or a training that already has momentum and has legs and has proven value. And the question is, podcasting, that's a thing. Maybe we should do that too. We'll say, hey, let's slow it down. Let's think like construction people. What are the general phases? But before we get into that, I'm going to put you guys on the spot. Name, title, how many years you've been at Sundt, and why you are passionate about this. So, Brandon, name, title, years at Sundt, and passion, go.
All right. I'm Brandon Drury, Project Manager, Sundt Construction. Been here 6 years.
Okay.
Just actually hit my 6-year anniversary.
Congrats.
Thank you. It's been a good road. I've been in the industry about 20 years, and I'm primarily passionate. A quote comes to mind from Ferdinand Porsche that I couldn't find the sports car of my dreams, so I built it to myself. Right. So that one resonates with me, especially for the fact that we saw a need. I pitched this opportunity to our upper management, liked it, we tried it out, and 3 years later, here we are, and this is like the natural evolution to keep going.
Got it. And what you pitched 3 years ago was this idea, this training of the skilled builder that is right now it's based leveraging using Teams and largely PowerPoint and engaging in interactive training, correct?
Right. So pre-COVID, it was a lunch and learn.
Okay.
So we would have trade partners would come in as guests and help us to highlight on whether that was fire protection, electrical, or what have you.
Yeah.
And it's since COVID, we've implemented Teams, taken on that virtual component,
Yep.
and it's kind of taken on a little bit of a different life of its own. We cover processes, we do how-tos on internal topics so that we can kind of increase engagement, collaboration, kind of provoke conversation,
Yep.
get people talking about what's the best way to do things, rather than just being on your one project team. We can get people talking.
Yep. That's awesome. All right. Name, title, years at Sundt, years in the industry. You get a fifth one.
Yeah.
We're evolving right here. And why you're passionate about this. Go.
Yeah. Okay. So name Adam Mack, Sundt Construction.
Those are two names. Adam Mack. Because
Correct.
sometimes it feels like Adam Mack.
Yeah. Adam Mack. Adam Mack, Sundt Construction. I'm the California District HS&E Manager.
Okay.
15 going on 16 years with Sundt. Actually, closer to 16 years with Sundt, and 23 years in the industry.
Okay.
Started really early. Why I'm passionate about it, I mean, Brandon really hit the nail on the head. Part of my job that I love is where I go and what I get to do. I get to visit all of our project sites.
Right. I
have the opportunity to engage with all of our employee owners. And I love to teach. I love to help and inspire and bring other people up. It's just something I love to do. I'm very passionate about, and that just ties right into contributing with the skill builder and what we're doing now, with a lot of the safety trainings that we do, and being able to take this and add to another medium is just it's really exciting.
Yeah. It's awesome. And obviously, affectionately known, at least by me. I don't think anyone else calls it this.
No.
But I like it. ETP, Erik the Producer.
Yes.
Everything that makes the podcast successful on our end goes through Erik, and he makes all the gears run smoothly. You hold me accountable. Introduce yourself.
I'm Erik the Producer, Rossi. I've been working with you for almost a year and a half now. So
Glorious year and a half.
yes, very glorious, and we have a lot of fun. We do the podcast. It's a lot of work, but really every day, we have other things going on in our business, but we touch the podcast every single day.
Right.
So it's a huge time commitment that we love to do. We are passionate about it. We think we bring some value to the construction industry with topics that we approach too. So we are here to answer any of your questions and to help you guys out.
We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
And I think often when people think about a podcast, and I've had this actual conversation with multiple people, and they're smart people, and they know what it takes to create something of quality. But when it comes to podcasts, they'll say, well, it's just audio. You can pretty much just throw out your iPhone and just record the audio and just throw it out to the internet. I'm like, can you do that? Sure. Right? It's like this idea about who can write a book. Anybody can.
Yeah.
I can just throw it in there and just convert it to, iBook and then put it on Amazon, right? Yeah, you can. However, if you want it to be of quality and something that people really listen to and get the most value out of, there's a lot that goes in there. And Erik knows, because he's holding me accountable week in, week out, there's a very frequent underestimation of how much time and energy and attention goes in to do it well, so it doesn't become something that you despise or dislike, that becomes a chore. So we're going to talk about that structure. So because we're construction dudes and we know how to plan a large project and to segment it into some steps, we're going to think along the lines of like business development, right? How do we think about understanding the audience, coming up with a name, thinking of the artwork? How do we get some people excited? How do we sell the idea of this as phase one? We're going to do a pre-con as we start to mobilize, start thinking about the gear we'll get into. Then we're going to do operations. What's the process of executing it consistently? And then we're going to end up with the closeout, right?
Yep.
How do we measure results? How do we look back at what we're doing and then refine and tweak? So let's just start, Erik, as we think about business development, what's like the first question you would ask folks like Adam and Brandon as they say, listen, I got enthusiasm, expertise, we've got an idea. By the way, we've got this training program that's going really well. This is a natural step to do something to leverage podcasts to build on that.
The first question I always ask is, what led you down the road to wanting to do a podcast? We just talked about the time consumption that it's going to take in your life, and what makes you think that the podcast is the way to go to deliver your message?
So we've been doing the Skilled Builder format, like we said earlier, is it started as a lunch and learn. We had people all in the room. It would be local, so it was just for San Diego employee owners. And then after COVID, we used Teams. It morphed. We were able to capture more folks, so we invited all of our people within California. So we had better exposure. And at this point, the vision would be that we're able to get this out to the whole company, is really the vision, that we're able to get this out, reach more people. So it came up in a conversation as to why not. We're exploring it, and that's exactly why we're here, to hear from you guys, to get better perspective, to evaluate if that is our next move. But it appears to be.
Yeah. I'm going to jump in right now, as should always point out, a little bit of flexibility and adaptability. Because sometimes you might be in a very good place and occasionally a mower that will come in and out throughout that we just have to deal with. And sometimes you can pay him $20 and say, hey, man, I need you to do the other property. Some cases not. So I'm just going to point that out for our viewers and listeners as this thing comes and goes. But this is what happens. You got to kind of plan for that, right? And in some cases you mitigate it. In other cases you're like, listen, I'd love to have you guys stick around for the next 3 days and we could find the ideal time in a mowerless environment. But sometimes not. We know in sales, we'll often talk about, and I believe we're all selling something. Number one rule in sales is it's not about you, right? Mm-hmm. And creating a podcast is obviously very personal. You're like, well, maybe I won't say it out loud, but a lot of days it seems like me. So the natural question I always ask is, knowing your audience. If you had to identify an audience of one, tell me about the audience of one. Who's this individual? How old are they? What's their job? And how is this going to help them? Because sometimes it's easy to think everybody, we're going for global domination. Joe Rogan, look out. Long enough timeline, we're going to go, it's not going to be an internal, it's going to be external, and we're going to blow the doors off everybody. The reality is, though, if we're not solving a problem for at least one person, giving them insight and entertainment, we often struggle. So we're not making it for everybody. So Adam, who's the one person in your mind? Again, first name, last initial. Tell me about this individual.
Well, I think we could say, without even saying a first name or last initial, we could say it's the 23-year-old field engineer who just graduated from college, or maybe it's the 26-year-old project engineer who has been at Sundt for a couple years now, that really needs to hear a message directed at them without being directed at them,
Yeah.
or called out in a meeting, right? It's that person who needs a little bit of extra nudge. It may not want to be done in a live setting,
Yep.
but that can listen to this on a recorded basis, maybe rewind it, take it in a little bit more, and be prompted to reach out or be prompted to action. And when that may not happen in a live setting, what we're doing now on Teams, we ask for a response. We reach out to people. Hey, anybody got any comment? But those comments always come in front of 40 to 60 other people.
Sure.
So it's really hard to get that reaction or interaction out of people. But if we can reach someone on a one-to-one basis,
Yeah.
I think we're going to have a greater outcome there with reaction and the call to action that we're going to be prompting inside these. And Brandon, maybe you can explain it a little bit better. But
Well, he hit it right on the head. That's exactly what I think our target is to offer insights and give some perspective to folks that on topics, obviously, that are in a variety of
Yep.
areas that they just might not be able to get unless they were to listen to something like this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and so this is where, and again, Eric knows I'm one who is more inclined to take things a little too far, dig into too deep, where you're like, hey, you're past the point of diminishing returns. Maybe for viewers and listeners more than you guys, something to think about, though, is when you're forced to go to a single individual, I don't know if there is meaningful differences based on your description, maybe not. But if you say, hey, it's a 23-year-old field engineer who just graduated from Oklahoma State University and then has ended up in San Diego. Okay. Or if it's someone who's been here 3 years, there may or may not be meaningful differences between 3 years under your belt and no years under your belt. But again, it's something to kind of think about when you start thinking about the content you're putting out there and what you're advising. Yeah. Somebody might say, hey, maybe we are, and maybe it's a special episode just for the 23-year-old, but our still main audience is, a million people who are just like this 26-year-old.
Yeah, and I would hate to dial it back to just this 23 tour, because that it may be the same content that it has the same group is a project superintendent who's been with the company 20 years, right?
Sure.
Maybe the same focus.
And the original concept for Skilled Builder was to expand knowledge for FE or field engineer,
Yep.
project engineer, our project admins, field superintendents.
Yep.
So probably our core, our frontline force of folks, and being able to give any of those folks
Yep.
a takeaway. So we really try to hit something for everyone there, so
Yep.
that it isn't just putting, for a field engineer and then maybe a superintendent is rolling their eyes. We want to be able to get the experience from those seasoned folks,
Yeah.
and have them contribute to the conversation and maybe provide some of their insights, give us some of their lessons learned, identify risks, talk about their experiences and give some context to, like, hey, don't ever do this. And then have someone hear that and have them
Not
really
to-do list.
recognize, okay, when I'm in the field, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
And hearing that.
So, very important point. You're going to have guests on the show, correct?
Yes.
Great. Your cadence is going to be once a month out of the
That's
gate.
right.
Once a month, yeah.
And name, sounds like you've already got traction with the Skilled Builder. That's a known thing within Sundt. People get value from it. You're going to take that and you're going to extend that line, that brand, if you will, to be the Skilled Builder podcast, right?
Correct. Yep,
And
that's the vision.
I think when I hear you guys say that, you guys are lining up as we think about like this business development phase. We're selling the idea, got a good name that already has traction. It's not something new. People are going to immediately say, oh, okay. If I know what a podcast is, and I know the training that has been valuable from you guys and features other people, that's great. I think the obvious thing is when you bring in other guests, not only do you get different perspectives and different insights, valuable, you're also exponentially increasing the ability for this to reach other people. Instead of, oh, you guys are just shining the spotlight on yourselves, people are going to say, I heard you had Tommy Jenkins on there. I know Tommy. You should come down. I'll be on your show. And you get people who they start raising their hand and saying, we should talk about it. And then that's when you're getting traction. And as hosts, it makes it easier.
Yeah.
You're coming on the show. What smart things are you going to say? What are you going to, you're outsourcing, right? Some of that intellectual capital or the deliverables of the show. So I think on all those parts are really good. What else is on our kind of business development as we wrap up and head into pre-con? What other big things haven't we hit on?
Well, I know we talked a little bit about the show graphics and how you're going to, whether you're going to change each episode graphic and put the guest image on there. Guests love to see their image on a show graphic. So that's something that you will have to decide whether you want to switch that out every episode. I know, Brandon, you have some graphic design skills, whether you're going to do that or somebody else, that's going to fit into your time component there. But is that something that you've thought about, switching out the episode graphic each time, putting the guest image on it and let them, highlight that guest and let them be happy that they see their face?
So short answer, yes. Currently, the way that I put together Skill Builder is primarily through a PowerPoint presentation where I've developed graphics for Skill Builder, and then each time I'm customizing that presentation to obviously fit the content,
Sure.
And then tailor it to that. So I would be basically doing similar, but updating each episode with the graphics to represent the topic.
Yeah, and I think Eric's hitting on something general but also specific is, number one, have you guys thought about the branding? That's a big part. You guys already got some really strong branding internally. You got a strong marketing team. You're blown away on some of the stuff they did for your safety department. How can we bring in some of those resources? Have you communicated, et cetera? But the other part is, and this was really a 2x4 to the side of the head for me, we went to our printer and said, we want to make coasters for the podcast. And like, great idea. So we sent over the podcast artwork. Your vice president, Paul Levin, was on the show. As a thank you, I sent him coasters. What was on the coasters? Was it his face? It was not. It was my face. Why? It's my show. This is the artwork. And he responded and said, hey, no offense. Why do I want a coaster with your face when I've been on the show? And as someone,
I'm the talent here.
Yeah. As someone who is not at a loss for words often, I thought, I'm like, why didn't I think of that? You know what he'd really like, and doesn't cost much money. It's another step in the process. I'm going to send the show artwork that we made, turn those into coasters, and then send it to him. So about 2 weeks later, he got to, I'm sure he already threw away my face on a coaster. It came with the podcast artwork with his face that we used for that episode. Yeah. And again, what are we looking for? We're looking for traction. I want something that people want to talk about, and they want to talk about themselves. So again, kind of how can you lead into that? Before we get off the business development here, I'll say this is last night at dinner, we posed this to you guys as 2 questions, and I think they're really important questions that you really are thoughtful for at the beginning, and they're 2 sides of the same coin. One is, what does success look like for you, and how are you going to measure it? And the other side is kind of this idea of a pre-mortem. We know what a post-mortem is. Someone dies and we say, hey, what happened? A pre-mortem says, I got bad news for you guys. We're living in the future. Looking back 2 years from now, this, through a series of forces, has led to a failure. This idea of yours, the podcast, it went poor. It's not happening. You're not doing it anymore. What were the most likely causes of failure? And what we often see, there are some really likely causes of failure that aren't that hard to think about. And then if we identify them up front, we work backwards, we can make sure we're not tripping over those. So we're not going to go into those now, but I think for listeners and for viewers, as you're thinking about this, really, and I would say put them on paper. And if it's just verbal, it can sound intelligent. We talk for 2 or 3 minutes a piece, and then we feel like, I've got it covered. You put that in writing, and it's 4,000 words of mush. You're like, probably need to refine this before we go in front of the executive C-suite to really talk about this stuff. Right?
Yeah, and as builders, I mean, that's kind of how we think. What I heard out of that is, know your end result before you start.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
So, looking at what success looks like, and then let's kind of work backwards, and then work in some contingencies or highlight some of the areas that might be, areas we need to focus on. And but I think we've thought about that even overnight, and really the success looks like the increase in collaboration, the increase in participation on our internal. We have what's called Sundt community, where people post ideas, innovations, shares, lessons learned, things like that. So our goal would be to uptick participation in that, so that you're actually seeing people share more, you know. And I think right now we're working towards that, and like to Adam said earlier, we're getting past and still kind of working through people being in a new format. Teams, you know, for some folks, some use it far more than others.
Yep.
You're visible, you're in front of, you know, sometimes executives are on the call, so not everyone has the same comfort level of just being open book and transparent and letting it rip. Whereas in this format, we're hoping that we'll be able to kind of take some of that shyness away, but still get the end result of increasing our culture.
And looking at it from a metric standpoint, because people like numbers, right? Yes. People say, you know, okay, that sounds good, but what does that look like numbers wise? And on an average month, we're looking about 40 to 60 participants in the Skill Builder and some other trainings that we do. You know, so, all right, what does that look like for our podcast? If we can get to that number and maybe after 12 months, double that number, that is success. Because now we know we are increasing participation, we're increasing conversation, and, you know, it's spreading and growing. Yeah. And I think you kind of hit on those measurables as number one, thinking thoughtfully about that, and then getting kind of buy-in and kind of getting those blessed by upper management. You'll be doing that. And I think there's a whole series of objections people might have, which is we got a lot of baby boomers in the industry and half of them use flip phones and they don't know what a podcast is. Two, hey, what's the return on the investment here? And I think that is the most obvious one that people will say. I can argue both sides of it. I think you should answer the question. I would also argue some of the most important things that happen on the job site really are hard to measure. Now, if an executive asks you that and you say, I've thought about this, and quite frankly, some of the most important stuff you can't measure. That's not a good answer, you know? So thinking about that, and I think, again, kind of putting on your sales hat, what are the objections people are going to have, and how can we kind of build those into there? But, all right, why don't we do this? I'm going to let's kind of jump into the pre-con. I think maybe we just start with where a lot of people want to begin. They start thinking, what do I need for gear? How do I think about that? I've done a lot of research. I spent 12 hours looking online. People overanalyze the gear. Why? Because they think it's fun, right? So
that was the first thing we did.
We're literally
it is fun. You're like,
where do we start?
Do I need a mixing board? What do I need, right?
Yeah.
I will say this. Just Google this. You can get 1,000 different ways to do it. I'm going to tell you how we did it. I think I pretty much stole the entire list of stuff off Tim Ferriss's podcast, which the guy's been pretty successful at it. And he talked about, you know, how if you buy the right gear and you have the right process up front, it'll minimize the number of times or that you record or you think you're recording and you don't, minimize the probability of failure. So at this point, because we have different partners for different aspects of our business around the country who do voiceovers and things like that. We have 3 of these right now. So this is a Zoom H6. You end up having basically the opportunity to have 6 different channels in here. And this is durable. You can just throw it into a backpack, easy to get beat up. And I've never had a problem with it. I would strongly recommend it to a friend. It's got some minor channels on it, but I probably only use it to, 10 or 20% of its capability. Super easy to use, just a few $100, maybe $300 or $400. So we'll have some links to that in the show notes. This is what Tim Ferriss recommended. After that,
and describe what it does.
Oh yeah, so it's a recorder.
It's a Zoom, bro.
It's a Zoom. So you're gonna have, these are called XLR cables. So I would strongly recommend, just for quality of content, could you get a bunch of stuff that is USB only that can hook up to a laptop or a phone? I would recommend going beyond that. Now, I know a lot of guys, that's all they do. And the stuff sounds good. And the reality is, when somebody listens to something, maybe if they tuned in when we had this mower going in the back, there's a really quick test. Does this sound good enough? And I would argue, while you want to make the investment in good gear like we have here, the difference between good enough, and amazing concert quality to the average listener is imperceptible. And you just plug in the cables here, and then you set up the mic stands here. So you will see the mic stands that we have here. These are actual mic stands these are actually for drum kit, that you would actually use a mic stand to put in front of a drum kit. And this one I believe is the same thing. And they're $20 a piece. They work fantastic. The mics that you two have here, actually you three, we lost a little foam cover on that one, so you might get more pee popping.
Sure, I will.
You will. These are Shure mics, SHURE, SM58s. They've been around for a long time. High quality stuff. They're $100 a piece. And then I've got, I went on ESPN and I said, what are the guys on ESPN that I watch every day? What are those guys using? I want one of those. So this is an Electro Voice RE20. This is like $450. But something to think about, and I could go on a tangent here and I've been rambling too much already, is what gear are you using and how are you signaling that this is important? All in, for if you get one of these mics, you can get all in for $1,500. If you just get another mic that I used for, 200 episodes before I got this one, you're out the door for $1,000. However, when people see it, especially if you're going to do like video clips to put on Instagram or, maybe just internally, when they see this setup, like, okay, these guys are legit, right?
Yeah.
And if it looks like you're using a Fisher Price microphone that just hooked into your iPhone and you're like, that's it. Part of this is managing perception and the fact that this is important, this is high quality stuff, and we're making the investment not only of time and energy, but with the actual gear we're using.
Yeah, absolutely. And that really speaks to how we execute anyways.
Exactly. Okay. The only other thing I would strongly recommend here is you're going to go through a lot of batteries. So getting Energizer rechargeable batteries, we've got a few of these floating around. It's worth the investment up front and saves a ton of money in the long term. But otherwise, that's it. So Zoom H6.
That's recording.
This is the recorder. Yep, just flips on. Getting a halfway decent set of headphones would be a good idea, just so you can kind of listen in, adjust the volumes here. And then, so the recorder's here, then you'll record here, and then you just upload that directly into your laptop. And then that's where we kind of get into the operation side. Eric, as we think about gear here, anything else you'd recommend that I kind of breezed over?
I think the platform that you use is a big consideration.
Yes.
We use a platform called Riverside.fm to record a lot of our podcasts. It records in video. It separates the tracks. It separates audio tracks from video tracks. It gives you a number of options that you can use there. You can edit video clips there, send them straight to social media. So using a recording platform like Riverside is very important and something that you guys should consider.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's when we kind of capture it. We should probably just mention when it comes to how you distribute it. So the podcasting community has come a long way, especially in the last 2 years. Several years ago, I would go, before distributors started getting really robust and helpful, I would go and we would put them on multiple platforms each week. And now you just go to a distributor. We use one called Libsyn, which is short for Liberated Syndication. They've been good. The one that I would recommend folks check out is Castos, Castos, where it allows you to make content. And for right now, you guys are doing this internally at Sundt. You're going to have great success. And people start saying, you know what, when it comes to safety, we want to help the entire industry. Maybe some of these are internal and external. It allows you at a simple toggle, just go click, and this will then make them all internal versus external. So with the click of a button, you can then say, go global or nope, just to this distribution list. Excellent. And I think a lot of companies right now are really going to benefit from this ecosystem around podcasting to make it really easy to say, we're going to start off, it's just internally. You mentioned, Adam, like some of the stuff we'd consider trade secrets. Yeah. This is stuff, these are earned insights that productivity and management, leadership, blah, blah, blah. I should say blah, blah, blah. These are really important. Continue doing it. However, you just want to keep those in-house. Yeah. Those are all going to be internal. Basically, you're just going to upload your email distribution list, and it's only going to those people, and you can track the engagement when they open. So a lot of that's really exciting. And then you get to the point where you want to make it global. maybe just, episode 288, that's when you're going to start, or you want to make that external, click of a button, and now it's going everywhere. So that's exciting for the industry, and I think it's a good opportunity for you.
A big question is, you said when you started your podcast, it was, a labor of love for you, and you did a lot of work yourself. Would you recommend, looking back on it, would you recommend an audio engineer right out of the bat, or recommend, getting the experience and really editing it and spending that time to know what it takes to produce and create that content on your own?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think it's something you guys want to think about is kind of tied into almost that first part of the business development of getting buy-in from management is, do you have a budget for this? And if so, how much are we using for that? Personally, especially I think with your background, I think it's a good idea to really take ownership. And if you're comfortable with it, learning editing software for audio is not hard at all. By doing that, when you decide that, maybe your audio engineer didn't hit a date, or dude, that's time for another podcast. We went through multiple, after I decided I got to get out of the editing game, it took us probably 5 different audio engineers to finally find Will and the team that they've got now who are fantastic. So by me knowing exactly how to do it, I could always muscle up and say, I'm going to do this myself, and I'm cranking it out, and I'm going to do it, and I know it's going to be done right. So I think there's a peace of mind that if worst comes to worst, we know how to do it ourselves. And then I think at a certain point, you guys will see your capabilities, the value you bring to Sundt. The best use of your time is not editing podcasts. It's somebody else. And then you develop the process that really makes it sustainable long term. So I think I probably gave you a poor answer to that, but hopefully something to kind of think about there.
What software did you use? Were you using Adobe?
I was not. I was using GarageBand.
GarageBand.
And still, if I'm getting there, mess around. I'm a Mac guy. So that software is good enough. And I think this kind of goes into, there's a bunch of different platforms. You are using
Camtasia.
I've heard that one, yeah.
There's a lot of really good ones. The great part about podcasts is it's audio only. Now I say this as we have full video crew here, right? So if you are listening to this, know that we are also putting these out in kind of smaller bite-sized chunks so people can visualize what we're talking about when we talk about the Zoom H6, et cetera. But there's a lot of different platforms that work really well. The thing about audio is there's no lights, there's no camera. You are looking at you're looking at audio wave, right?
Yeah.
And you can visually see when things got to get cut. So relatively easy software to learn if you are so inclined to be comfortable using different software, which I know you guys are.
Yeah.
So we've got the platform. We talked about a distributor. And again, there's a lot of different distributors. I think there's a lot of really good ones, which I think you're going to have some options there. And Erik, you talked about the actual platform for when you do have guests. And I think as you guys grow, you guys might be together in San Diego, but you got somebody from Sacramento who's, been with the company 30 years. He's a superintendent, and he's smart and funny and has some great wisdom, and he has a top 5 list of not to do things that he can crank out in 9 minutes. Being able to bring him in and using Riverside.fm, strongly recommend to a friend to capture good audio and good video. And it's like $25 a month.
Yeah, it's cheap.
They also have a ridiculous option where you almost get nothing more, but you can also pay $1,300 a month. So I know you guys are a big company. Maybe you want to muscle up there and get them more. We've stuck at the $25 a month deals just fine. So now that we're into operations, Erik, this is where I say ETP. Make all the magic happen. I have the fun. I meet with guys like you. I love doing it. I've learned so much. I think it's helped me as a businessman. I think it's helped me as someone in construction to learn more from smart people. My goal is to record the pod and say, all right, and I will not listen to it until it comes out. And that might be 2 weeks later. It might be 6 weeks later. But Erik takes that. So Erik, where would you start this conversation of the actual process of once you get done recording with the gear, whether that's virtually with Riverside FM or like we're doing here in person, after that's done, I'm going to take this, I'm going to upload it to you, then what?
Well, then I send it off to the audio engineer. We also use a platform called Otter, which I'll take that recording. Otter is a platform that converts the audio into a transcript. So I have that transcript. I can read that podcast while the audio engineer is editing. So that's part of the process.
Otter like an animal.
Yeah.
You kind of say it.
Otter.
It's because you're from Pittsburgh. You say like an otter with some D's. It's like an otter. Like the animal.
Do you really want me to get into your
No, keep
Chicago
going. You're fine.
accent?
You're fine. No, carry on. Anyway, so you get the transcript there.
Otter.
Yeah.
O-T-T-E-R.
I got it on the first one.
Like, thank you.
Yeah. We picked it up.
So yeah, after you receive the recording or you do the recording, there's a lot of work to do after that. Not only sending it to the audio engineer or editing it yourself, you're getting the graphics ready, you're uploading it once it's all done to the platforms. You're figuring out a way to distribute it. While you're doing that, you're also working on the next episode or two, scheduling that with people, getting those roads created. And so, have you thought about this process and how long it's going to take for you to do all this? Do you have the time for that?
So the way that you described it is very similar to the amount of effort that we currently put in and invest to create our episodes now, which, although in a different format, sounds to be very similar, like as far as scheduling, right? Planning out content, knowing what we're going to be talking about, researching, making sure that we have all of that information that we want to be ready for or what we're going to be discussing. Obviously, if there's a guest on, coordinating with them, getting them dialed in, comfortable, ready, and prepared, and then also align kind of the expectations of how that's going to go, so that we get that desired output. And then really the rest of that, I think that there's an element that really we're have to get in and do it. I'm sure as you described, it's probably more time than we anticipate, but having had kind of known that or experienced that with what we're currently doing,
outside of our day jobs, because we have day jobs that even outside of putting this together.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and I think that idea of the sweat equity, which you talked a little bit about, it's this thin line between, hey, really making it a focus and putting the extra effort up front, but trying to understand in your vision of where this goes, planning by episode 6. That gives us, if it's once a month, that gives us 6 months to find an engineer. We can make a referral. We can figure this out. We can talk budget. Right? Do we have all this planned? And that 7th episode, that's going to be the first one that we send off to the audio engineer. And now that process changes,
Yeah.
But I think I didn't plan that. I was like, I don't know. We'll talk here about seasons versus just doing them. Are you going to do seasons, or are you just going to is the goal do once a month forever? Ours, for better or worse, is until I die. We're going to do at least 6 or 8, not a week. 6 or 8 a month. So 1 to 2 a week forever. There's no stopping, right?
Yeah.
But those, until Erik came, then we started amping it up. But before, there was just kind of like, I'm just do it forever. And it's a forever thing. I didn't have a whole lot of foresight, and while it hasn't changed, it would have been helpful for me to really think this through in terms of time and budget and the overall investment you're making.
Well, I mean, the goal of what we're doing here, and the goal of this podcast, is to grow the Skilled Builder, to turn it into a Skilled Builder podcast along with the other content we're already producing. And we're not thinking about shrinking that back at all. We're thinking about growing that out into the enterprise. And so, like Brandon touched on, we are doing a lot of this work already anyways. We're setting up the meetings with the subject matter experts, the guests that we're going to have on our show. So in reality, this podcast looks like all the questions we're going to ask that person and all the content and the high points of that training is going to be the content for the podcast. It's already there. We're already doing it. It may take us a little bit longer to get through our prep for the Skilled Builder, to get that specific content created with with a microphone and all that. But yes, we understand there is going to be some added time. Good thing is it's not going to be a stretch from what we're already doing.
So the Skilled Builder, though, you're presenting it. It's online. You got the PowerPoint. You do all the prep, and when you're done, that is a finished thing, correct?
Yeah, and we'll distribute that within Teams, post it on Teams so that someone else could view the recording. What I'm anticipating is maybe less time on the graphics and the actual presentation, and putting that back into maybe the preparation of the episode.
Yeah, I think you guys will be fine on the front end. I'm not worried about the prep. The reality is, though, and I think where the extra effort comes in, that I know I underestimate it. I don't know. I just trust you, and you just do it. So I have no idea how much time you take on it.
ETP takes a lot of work.
ETP
More work than you know.
On average, how many revisions does each episode get for us that we put out?
On average, 2 or 3.
Okay. So this is, and again, you could just go straight raw, like a live stream. I don't think so.
Yeah,
Why? Because I'm not that articulate. I've already screwed up 6 times here.
Yeah.
I want to make, not only do myself do I want to make me sound intelligent, I want to make sure our guests get this back.
Absolutely.
And this is the feedback we get. We'll have guests on, and they'll say, I was a little nervous. I listened to it. Like, I sounded really good. And what I don't say is, we did 2 or 3 revisions, and we took out your 48 ums, and we reordered a couple things. Why? Because I want to make sure you want to come back and you say, that was a great experience, and it helped me. Like, that's what we're doing this for. It's those revisions that I would say, I think, well, the people listening will determine how good ours is. I just know listening to other ones, especially ones that are really produced, they have sound design, and when you're walking to the job site, they'll describe it and you're hearing the crunching of the stone beneath the boots. Like, that's the sort of stuff that is, it takes extra work, which is more money. But those are the ones where you separate from someone saying, dude, this is a really good, even if it's 20 minutes or 9 minutes, this is a really thoughtful, really good listening experience, versus pretty sure they just did one pass and they just cleaned it up, and it's essentially, it's raw with some light editing, versus people, I mean, you listen to our stuff multiple times and really nitpick in a really positive way.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it takes time, and you want to make, like you always say, it's not about you. You want to make your guests sound great. You want to make the podcast sound great. You want to get the message across, and you don't want listeners thinking like, boy, this guy says a lot. Right. So you want to make it clean. You want to make it flow great. And you're going to have to go through a few passes of listening to that and editing it and figuring that part out. And that takes a little bit of time. It takes a little bit of getting used to, maybe this question should be a little bit higher in the podcast than where it is. So it's a feel, but you'll get used to it. And first part is cleaning it up. Second part is reordering if necessary and getting it right, making your guests sound great.
So we've developed a draft content plan for Skilled Builder for FY23.
Okay.
That basically is categorized by subject matter expert, so that we have a target as to who would be the primary point person, and then there's obviously we have some opportunities for others, if there's schedule conflicts or whatnot, and also some variety, and we just kind of had been talking about going through those different categories kind of linearly.
Linearly.
There you go. Thank
that's
you.
not even
Thank
it.
you.
Like a line.
Like a line. Straight like an arrow.
Because similar to how we kind of outlined our framework for today, being builders, taking it from the beginning
to the
all
end.
the way through in these different categories, and then being able to forecast. And once we were done with it, we realized, okay, we got content for a couple of years here.
Yeah. No, I think that's really smart. I would say 2 things on that. Number one is, we'll often refer to how many do we have in the can? And you can imagine if you're doing 1 a month, I would say do not, before you launch, if you're going to start in January, do not launch until you have at least 3 episodes done, 100%, that you could share with people. Because what happens is, and something to think about, is say you're going to start with 1 a month. When a podcast comes out, I might listen to one, I'm like, dude, this is great. Where's number 2? Oh, I got to wait a month? Yeah. So something to think about. You might think maybe year 1 is not 12, maybe it's 15. And we'll do 1 a week for the first 3, and then we go back. Why? I want to get traction as soon as possible before we then go back to the 1 a month.
Makes sense.
Maybe.
Yeah.
You might think back and you're like, I don't know. He just threw out an idea. He doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. I don't know.
No, it sounds,
but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
And I'll do that, especially if I find a new podcast, and I'm always looking for ones. And it's good, especially if it's short.
Yeah.
I'll want to kind of binge it, and I might just wrap through a bunch.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So how can you kind of build that in? The other thing I'll tell you is I often think about this. This is a line from writing, but the idea that you got to kill your darlings. You're going to have some stuff that you really love, and it sounds great. And Eric and I will do this. And Eric, while he's so valued to me and our company, most of the time you do it very nicely. Sometimes it's just super direct and it doesn't seem nice. It seems more Pittsburgh than Dallas in feedback. And it's like, it's not good enough. And I'm like, I know, I love it, but let me tell you, he's like, it's not good enough. And the idea of killing your darlings, which is stuff that you came up with, you love the topic, you got to kill that. And I would tell you, if you guys have a plan for the first 3 years, tell me about the first 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 episodes. And don't think about a sequence. Bring your best stuff. The guy that you're thinking about would be an awesome guest who's funny and smart, and you're going to slot him in for episode 6 because of this. I'd be like, put him number 1. And how can you get people saying, oh my God, that's so good. When's the next one coming out?
Yeah.
Call.
So front load your awesomeness, because who knows? You don't know what's going to happen. It's possible that despite your best efforts, you don't get much traction after year 1, and you don't want to think like, oh God, we were saving this guy for kicking off season 2.
Yeah.
Bring them in and bring your best people up front.
Should have had Ian McDowell on.
Yeah, I always like to refer to that as, start with your murderer's row. The 27 Yankees lineup. Get your top ones out there.
Yep.
Drive engagement. Get people listening.
Yeah.
And get them caught on to the podcast.
Yeah, the other thing to think about, I don't think it's relevant for you guys if you're cadence of one a month, but it's not uncommon for people to think in terms of seasons. And maybe season 1 is going to be 10 episodes. And what that will allow you to do, say, hey, we're going to crank out 10 episodes. We're going to launch with 3 in the can. We're not really saying when season 2 is going to start. It will give you some breathing time after season 1. And again, so you'll say, hey, we're going to have all those episodes done in 6 to 8 months by saying, hey, our plan is, 18 months from now is when season 2 is going to start. If you decide to start season 2 earlier, people are like, great, I love the first season. That's awesome.
Yeah.
But we don't have that now. And quite frankly, I don't want it. Yeah. It's also weird. There's some people like, we've been doing a podcast for 3 years. We're on season 9. I'm like, what? That just doesn't make any sense to me. But for us, there's no breathing time. Yeah. It's forever. That's by design, but that doesn't allow us breathing room. And you guys might say, hey, it might be beneficial to take a step back. We're going to structure it by season. Now, maybe you structure season, and season 1 is 10 episodes, and you realize, I think we're good. We're just going to go 1 a month forever. Then ditch the season. No one's going to remember. They're like, hey, wait a minute. You started season 1, and then you just went to a monthly episode. No one cares. But I think that's a way, if you're thinking it would be helpful for any number of reasons to have a pause in between to reflect and maybe re-strategize. A season is going to be a way to do that while fulfilling all the promises that you're going to make to your listener.
Got it.
Yeah, that's definitely something to consider.
Yeah.
Especially with the way that we've kind of developed the plan, it's definitely something to evaluate.
Yeah, and you'll see some folks who will have a theme for the season, and maybe it's, I don't know, you pick some sort of aspect that ties to a core value or an annual initiative, and that's kind of your theme. It's broad enough where it'll still allow you to get a field engineer or superintendent or maybe work on pre-construction or versus closeout. It'll give you flexibility. But you're like, hey, the theme of season 2, that is going to be a thread that connects everyone, is this.
Yeah.
So there's still a lot of options in there, but it's also a way to kind of engineer some breathing room in case you need it.
Yeah, nice.
All right, anything else we missed on the operational side? I think we breezed over it, but I would just like to hit on, if you're thinking of a training, especially internally, this transcript idea. I pay $150 a year to the Knowledge Project, which is one of my favorite podcasts. They got some really smart people in there, and I'll listen to it. And they come out every other week. I pay $150 to review the transcript, and I can download it as a PDF. So I'll listen to it, and then I'll go back, and I might kind of refer to certain sections. Know that even if you're paying, I don't know what you pay for Otter.com.
It's cheap. It's
all right,
$10 a month.
Maybe $10 a month is, if you do that. Or you're going to get some listener is going to reach out. It's going to be very flattering, and you're going to get excited. They're going to say, "Hey, that episode was amazing. Is there any way I can see the transcript for that?" And you're like, "Hell yeah! It's $9 a month." Know that to go through to edit a transcript, even from a real professional, AI embedded transcript service, is going to be ridiculous. It's going to take you a long time to do that.
Wow.
So we pick our spots, and somebody recently, a client of ours, a listener at a client, reached out and said, "This was amazing. I want to use this as a training tool." I'm like, flattered. I'm like, "Great, let's give him a transcript." Like, we already got a transcript in Otter. Yeah, like 7 hours later, we cleaned it up. You got to listen line for line, and then you got to format it.
Yep.
Because otherwise, I think it came out in one giant block of text. No line breaks. It was a giant.
It was a beautiful block of
It
text.
was so intimidating. I'm like, oh God, this is ugly. I'm like, we got to break it out. To do all that, you are just exponentially adding to your time. Now, I would argue, I think it's a great tool. For me, I've determined, at least for one podcast, it's worth $150 a year. And my guess is they got a couple thousand people that pay for that. But it's a different audience for them. So something to think about. But all of a sudden, you can, from audio, you can get a PDF. That can be a training tool. It can be, then you can turn it into a newsletter, a blog. There's ways that you can take that same content and share it in different ways.
So you had mentioned on the time piece there, for what's your overall estimated time you think for
Great question.
process?
All right, Eric, I want you to answer that. I have a number in my mind of how long it takes you per episode. Okay? So per episode, how many hours are you putting in on your end after we record? I upload it to you. I probably forget to give you a title or any details about who I met with and what we talked about. How many hours does it take you per episode?
I would say anywhere from 5 to 7.
Okay, I was going to say 6 to 7.
Yeah.
On my end, like with you guys, we met before, but I will generally do about an hour worth of prep where thinking about you guys. In some cases, I might be calling people who know you, checking out on LinkedIn, developing some questions. And then obviously you would have the time that we're actually recording it. Then you throw in a little drive time if you're meeting somewhere. So my guess is on my end is probably another 3 hours. So 10 hours per episode. And we try to get our episodes that we may or may not be failing to do right now, somewhere between 35 to 45 minutes if we have guests on. So to give you an idea there, I'm going to forget the guy's name, but there's something that's called like Hempstead's Law. That is, whenever you have a plan, it's going to take twice as long and cost twice as much money to complete, even when factoring in Hempstead's Law, which is kind of funny to think about, but that gets closer to like when I write down it's going to take this long, this is how much money it's going to take. Consistently, I have a failure to learn from my poor predictions. So you guys will probably do better because you're smarter.
No.
I'm right there with you.
Constant basis, my wife asks me, "How long is it going to take you to do that, honey?" And I tell her, "Oh, so double that?"
Yeah. Or on the cost. How much is it going to take to remodel the bathroom? And then I give her the cost, and then she's like, "Oh, okay, that's going to be way more than that."
Yes, exactly. All right, close out. Eric, what do we have? So in the construction process, we close out. The project's done. We're wrapping up, punch list items, maybe things like that. I think here my mind kind of goes to kind of measurements and looking back and how do you improve. What comes to mind for you at this stage?
Yeah, okay, you have a podcast, it's in the can. How are you going to get people to listen to it? Where are you going to put it? How are you going to get the word out? How are you going to drive the success of this podcast?
For our initial, because this being targeted for our employee owners, that's probably going to be hosted on SharePoint, I would imagine.
I think SharePoint is the obvious place, and sometimes they're like, "Hey, man, we've really invested. We want people thinking, where do I find this?" It's our intranet. It is SharePoint. That can work, right? I don't know necessarily how you track that, how many listens you can get if I'm just going in there and there's just literally an MP3 file in there. But this goes to the platform, and my recommendation, what we've kind of helped other clients, is using a platform that will be your distributor for that, and then just send it out and track those analytics. So you just be going to that. It will simplify a lot of that. But one of the objections would be is, hey man, think of all the time and training and our mantras. It's on SharePoint, it's on SharePoint, it's on SharePoint. And then you guys have something cool and new and it's a file and you don't put it on SharePoint. You guys are going to have to figure this out internally.
Yeah.
But it's not an insignificant question beyond, is it easy to find? my experiences pre-corporate, well, shit, even with us now, it's like, hey, it's out there. Where is it? I can't find it. You can't find it. I'll send you the link. Like, we do this, and we have a small company. You have a, whatever, multi-billion-dollar company. Lots of people making it super easy to find and access. That's a speed bump that you got to make sure you level out to make it real easy.
Getting on SharePoint, I think, is a no-brainer. But having something like that where we could, have tracking the data, tracking the downloads, tracking the listens, I think is also a huge benefit too, because that's going to help us, by one of our metrics proving if this is successful or not.
Exactly. Yeah, and I mean, maybe you guys decide we do it both.
Yeah,
I'm going to load those in there. I'm going to try to get the hooks in there any way I can and make this. I know you guys are using it in another frame, sticky. How do you make this where you're like, I want to find where the rest of these are? And if people are finding it on SharePoint, and maybe that's a way where they can just stumble upon it. They're like, I've seen this in emails. You put it in 2 places. I could argue for and against that. It's not that important, but for you guys just to think about, and I will often ask is, other initiatives that have gotten off the ground in Sundt and have been successful and have gathered momentum, how have they done that? What has already worked? And think of a snow hill. And if there's already grooves in that hill going down, jumping in right there and saying, what did you guys do to make that successful? We're going to do the same thing. And all of a sudden, it's familiar to people. It's not something new and different. Oh, we just find it the same way and we do it this way. Oh, yeah, it's just like something we did a couple of years ago and that worked really well. So leveraging what's already successful, those bright spots within Sundt, I think will ease your transition and help you build momentum faster.
Agreed. Yeah, absolutely.
All right, guys. Well, I think this is a good place to close out. We covered gear. We covered that process. And I would just think, especially for folks in our industry, thinking methodically about how do we build a large project, and some of that analogy can we apply here. So
Absolutely.
Business development, the pre-con, the operations, and the closeout. And I'm excited for you guys because especially when you have something that is successful and you're taking it to a different medium, but one that doesn't, it's just audio. So audio is easier. You don't need lights, camera, action. So I'm excited. I think you guys will be really successful. And if we can help you in any way, we can. Erik, I want to thank you. You make our podcast work. I get the fun part, the easy part, just meet with cool guys like you. And then I hand it off and I'm like, hey, in a couple of weeks, this better show up and sound awesome.
Well, it's pretty fun for
Snapping
me too.
fingers.
So, I do enjoy it.
Yeah, and we really appreciate your time and the investment of, going through this and being open book and being transparent and allowing us to take this next step. We really definitely appreciate it.
Cool.
Absolutely.
Yeah, hats off to you guys. We really appreciate it.
Adam Mack, Brandon Drury. Best of luck to you guys. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, guys.
All right.